All right. I believe the thing that we maybe haven't been as good at doing, that because it is a remote meeting, we should be doing a roll call. So commissioners would be myself, I am present. Holly,
Present.
Leanne,
Present.
and absent are Brian Postlewaite and Katie Milton, or Catherine Milton. And I think for notes purposes, it would be great if we can just do a quick round of who else is here. And apologies, I forgot to say that if you're comfortable sharing pronouns, we'd love to put that in the notes as well. So Bonnie Dennis, she, her. I'm gonna go in order of who I see on my screen. Adrian?
Thanks, Bonnie.
Adrienne Pomeroy, she, her, ADA coordinator and staff liaison to this commission.
Thank you. Jamie?
Jamie Perconti, they, them, Associate Commissioner.
Thank you. Henry?
I'm Henry Hardy, Associate Commissioner, he or they.
Thank you. Crystal?
This is Crystal, they, them. I am a resident of Somerville.
Thanks. Holly?
Holly Simeone, she, her.
And Leanne?
Leanne Gerton, here they, Commissioner.
Great, thanks so much. Because we had the very short meeting last week where we managed to do a little bit of business, I do not have a chair update. I do want to give space. I didn't put it on the agenda, but Adrienne, if you have any updates, I'm happy to give you space to do that.
Thank you.
I don't have any per se. On a personal note, I'm actually working remote from Ohio, at least for the next week. My mother suffered a really bad fall and was in the hospital for about 5 days and now is in rehab and needed me to come help with that. So I'm here and available. I'm just doing it very remote for the next week or so.
This is Bonnie. I'm sorry to hear that. And I appreciate you being here to staff this. And I hope the healing goes smoothly.
Thank you.
This is Holly. I second what you said, Bonnie. I'm very sorry.
Okay, then moving on to business. We had gone over the meeting minutes last time, and I realized that I had forgotten to do a factual amendment to April 12th. So I just want to get that in there for the record, so it can be amended. So under accessible parking fund requirements, the meeting minutes said that it may not include items that other businesses, organizations, or institutions are already required to accomplish by law or regulation, which I think technically that is allowed, but we all agreed as a commission that we don't want that, so that's fine. But it follows, must be a benefit that supports. That's
Bonnie, could you share the screen or the document?
Let me.
You can't. I'm having a hard time. Oh wait, I've got to turn on live transcript. There we go.
Great. Sorry, I'm just reading from my notes right now, which I wrote notes of what it says, and then I'm going to say what I want it to be amended to, and then I've got this physically written down already so that I can share it with Brian to amend. But it says that it must be a benefit that supports the community in general or the disability community in particular and may not support individuals alone. And I think that should be amended to shall be used solely for the benefit of persons with disabilities, because that is what the statute says. It doesn't say that it can't be used to support individuals. It just says that it has to be used to support disabled people or the disabled community. So it also can't just be the general community that it serves.
Can it?
Yes, Holly.
I was just thinking maybe it's in a separate section, but to support and to educate others about persons. So I don't know if that's another area, but certainly communicating those that we represent.
Yeah,
So
this
this,
is,
yes,
sorry.
Lee.
This is Lee, and I was just going to say that the revised wording also sounds more like what I remember having been the discussion in that meeting. So as far as minutes purposes, that seems more appropriate to me.
I'm
Sorry, this is Bonnie. I didn't follow. Which seems more appropriate to you?
The revised wording that you're suggesting. And
This is Bonnie.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, to be clear, I went over the entire transcript from that meeting to see what the substantive discussion was. And yes, we talked about the nuance, and we didn't state that it can't be for individuals. And in terms of your point, Holly, yes, I do believe that educating the community would be a benefit to the disabled community. So the minutes aren't talking, they're not laying out every single thing to do. They're just, this is what we discussed, and this was the sort of overarching theme of it. And I just wanted to correct that it says that we can't support individuals, because that's not factually correct. So
This is Holly. Thank you very much, Bonnie, and Ian for the explanation.
So with that amendment, I want to do, or have somebody else call for a vote on those, approving those meeting notes as amended.
I was just about to ask if we needed to do that, so I will. Did we already approve those minutes last time? Okay, so I will motion to amend the meeting minutes for the April 12th meeting with the wording that Bonnie just presented.
This is Holly. I will second that motion.
Great. This is Bonnie. All in favor? Aye.
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 Great. Motion passes unanimously. Let me go back to the agenda. Sorry, I'm trying to use two computers to see things. So moving on to new business. The biggest thing is we have a variance request for 114 Professors Row, which is a Tufts dorm in Somerville. Everybody should have received the variance request. It is on Monday's agenda for the Architectural Access Board. I was so excited that we had it in time to submit comments well ahead of the meeting, and then last week happened with the Zoom bombing. So it's really important that we get this done tonight. And because we don't have a secretary here, I am going to take detailed notes on what we want to say, because I have to get these in prior to Monday to ensure that they're part of the public record and they are considered when the Architectural Access Board has that initial hearing on Monday. So be patient with me if I need to have you repeat something to type it. I'm also going to use the live transcript. I want to try to get down as much as possible. I have some thoughts of this on my own, but I would love to start with other people first. So if anybody wants to start, let me know.
This is Leanne. I'm happy to start.
Great.
Let me actually pull up my notes because I went over it right before the last meeting and now it's been a week. So I sort of had this split out into two sections of first the general question of, not adding an elevator and making it fully accessible, and then the, if that is granted, the other parts. So do you have a preference on which side to start on?
This is Bonnie. I think either side is fine. I think there will end up being discussion on all of it. So
Okay. Then I guess starting with the main question of should they be required to add an elevator and make it fully accessible. I did some research into how housing at Tufts works, because it's not one that I'm as familiar with. And as far as I could tell, for incoming first-year students, it seemed to be you're just assigned a place and don't really have any say in it. And then for continuing students, there's some amount of being able to, list a preference for which dorm you're going to be in, or there were also some, get the word, it was like theme communities, or theme houses, that were centered around a specific like activity or identity, that people would be specifically seeking out. And so and then the other part of it was trying to figure out, they say that, they have 5% of their rooms are already accessible. My question was, is that are there options for that, or is there a single building that is accessible? And if you need an accessible dorm, that's where you're stuck. As far as I could tell, for the options for sophomores, there was a single building listed with an elevator. Not all of the options for juniors and seniors specified. So possibly there was more than one, but it did not seem to be a majority. And for first-year students, it did not list in a place that I could find them. But my impression is that likely there is one option, maybe two. And so my thoughts would be the only way that I would support not adding an elevator to this building would be if they could show that there are multiple variety of options for accessible housing, not just a single building. And B, that it would have a significant impact, not just on the cost of the project, but on the number of students that could be housed comfortably. And C, that this building would not ever be one that anybody would specifically seek out to live in, so that it would, which I think would mean that it would only ever be housing for first-year students. Which the other thing I found is there was a listing of fraternities that one of them had this address. So I believe that this is housing for a fraternity, and thus specifically a place that somebody would seek out to live. And by not making it accessible, they're effectively barring disabled students from this fraternity. So my opinion would be that no, they should be adding an elevator and making the building fully accessible.
Great, thank you. Henry?
Hi, this is Henry Hardy. I concur with Leon's remarks, and I share his skepticism of why we should grant this. I want to focus on the application for variance under the instructions at point 2. Attach whatever documents you feel are necessary to meet the standard of impracticability laid out in 521 CMR 4.1. You must show that either compliance is technologically infeasible or compliance would result in excessive and unreasonable cost without any substantial benefit for persons with disabilities. So let's take those two cases. Compliance is technologically feasible. There would be a substantial expense, but on a $2.1 million project, And given the deep pockets of Tufts, it's certainly not beyond the realm of what is possible. So technologically, they can build an elevator. So let's take the second case. Would compliance result in an excessive and unreasonable cost? Well, they've come up with what I would call some pretty inflated figures to show a high cost, but they've not shown that these compliance features would not have a benefit. There would clearly be a benefit. So neither A nor B applies. My recommendation is that we suggest that this variance not be approved in the form that it's been submitted, because the documentation is insufficient to meet the conditions under the statute and the CMR. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, and welcome, Harriet. We are discussing the variance request for 114 Professors Row, Tufts. Is anybody else? Holly?
My cursor hates me. Can never find the unmute button. I find it interesting that they are taking an existing building and they're rearranging floors, bedrooms, common areas. I believe not only does it discriminate or eliminate people who cannot get inside of the building, but also it limits people who may want to visit family members or their children or be part of an event that could be held there. So I'm not sure if in general saying that this building, which is used for multiple things, in my opinion, it needs to be open for all. And I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, that you actually have to prove both. I don't know if this is the application, what date this is the application, but I thought it was that you had to prove that it wasn't feasible and it was too expensive. But either way, there are alternatives, which could be an outside elevator or a ramp, some other way to get into, I assume the first floor is accessible.
This is Bonnie. The application shows that there is currently a non-compliant ramp, and they are seeking relief from making that compliant. So there is a ramp that it exists. It does not have the appropriate handrails. It doesn't have the appropriate clearance. I don't remember. I would have to look closer at the details as to whether or not the slope was okay, but the ramp is non-compliant, and they are saying that they do not want to fix that either. In terms of visitability, the bathrooms do not appear to be on the first floor. So somebody might be able to get in the building, but they would not be able to substantially use the building.
This is Leanne. My memory that I'm trying to find in here to confirm is I think they were saying that there was a first floor bathroom that would be accessible, but they were not planning on making the second and third story bathrooms accessible. And I'm looking for the floor plans to check that.
I'm looking at,
I'm sorry, this is Harriet. My hand's raised when you're ready.
Yes, Harriet, if you'd like, or actually, let me just make sure. Holly, did you have further comments while we're looking at these nuances?
yes, my comments are
And then I'll come back to you, Harriet.
Yeah,
and
that's fine.
that they're making enough changes that what is not accessible outside as a ramp and railing should be brought up to code. But I think that there could be alternatives for a different way to have access into the first floor, and possibly if there was something to use a ramp or something covered to get into the second. I don't know. I'm spitballing on that. That is not the cost of an elevator. But my point is, if they were to purposely provide a bedroom and a bathroom and access to common areas, if they were on the second floor, maybe the third floor was other bedrooms, then they would have access to what everyone else has, other than they don't sleep on the third floor. So I don't know if our remarks should say that they must have one floor that is accessible with a bedroom, a bathroom, dinner, and laundry. It looks like they're not going to have laundry. They could easily move laundry upstairs.
So if people have substantive replies to Holly's, then I'll take those before moving on to Harriet. I saw, okay, Henry and Leon.
This is Leon. I have the clarifications that I found if we want to give those.
Okay, and then Henry.
So they are planning to put an accessible bath in the basement and on the first floor, and have an accessible, although they're asking for non-compliance as far as the ramp, entrance to the first floor and the basement, although it does not appear that there would be a way to get between them without going outside. There is laundry in the basement that they're asking for a variance to not make the laundry accessible because they say there's no accessible bedrooms. And the bedrooms are only on the second and third floor, which are not planned to be accessible.
Thank you. Henry?
Henry Hardy, my brief comment with regard to the possibility of having some floors be accessible and common areas be accessible, and some floors with bedrooms not being fully accessible, is that separate is not equal. And I think that while having partial compliance is better than no compliance, it's not an acceptable substitute. And this is not really a serious effort to comply. It's a serious effort not to comply, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
I believe there's something in the chat, but could you read it?
There is, which I will share momentarily. Leon, is this on the same? Because I do also want to have Harriet be able to make comments.
Yeah, this is on the same note as Henry's.
Okay.
I want to second that of the only way that I can envision them having an accessible bedroom without adding an elevator would be to add a single bedroom or two on the first floor, which I don't think would be an acceptable alternative because, yeah, it would be separating a disabled resident to that one floor. And there are common spaces on the second and third floor. And also it's a college dorm. Social things are going to be happening in people's rooms. So by not adding an elevator, you would be basically not allowing a disabled resident to participate in much of the social atmosphere of the dorm. And I don't see, I figure if they're putting an elevator to the second floor, they should put it all the way to the third floor. So they should just make the whole thing accessible.
Thank you. Harriet.
Thank you. Well, it follows closely on what Bonnie and Holly and Henry.
Sorry, I'm going to pause you for just 1 second.
Sure.
Thank you, people, for sharing things. But I would ask that if you could raise a hand or message me privately if there's something you want me to share, but let's not use the chat because not everybody can access the chat. And I want to ensure everybody can participate fully. So I will share those things after Harriet's speaking, but let's try not to use the chat as a feature of talking in the meeting. Thank you. All right, Harriet, thank you.
Sure. I did read through it, and it's striking how much they're just disinterested in making any real substantive change. And I think I may have written to you, Bonnie, or someone I wrote to, that the Cambridge Insight Meditation Center solved all of their problems, and this is a different building, but primarily by making a ground floor right at street level elevator that went right up through all 3 floors. And this is an old building. And they have 2 accessible bathrooms and common space and dining area on the first floor. And one last question that I'm not aware of, but I believe that all these private university institutions get federal funds. So there's no way that they should be able to avoid being ADA compliant. And I'm not deeply enough steeped in the regulations and the law, but it just occurs to me that if they had to make one serious change, it would be the elevator up all the way up and down, and it would be one accessible bath and bedroom on the second floor. I think there are 4 total, as I recall from the plan. That would be 25%. Anyway, thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. Yeah, so fair housing and MAAB has more stringent standards of accessibility requirements, and because they are doing such a substantial renovation, they would be required to comply. You're correct, but that's what they're seeking a variance to do, is to skirt that.
Right.
And I wish variances just weren't a thing. In this day and age, we should be striving to update things and make them accessible and build new things fully accessibly, and we're still not, unfortunately. So our power here is saying whether or not we think it complies with or meets the standards for being granted a variance. And I agree with everybody else here. But before I get into anything substantive, I want to add, I'm going to talk about the things in the chat. And then I think Jamie is maybe the only one who hasn't. So if you had anything, I'm happy to hear that as well. In the chat, Crystal pointed out that anyone could become temporarily or long-term disabled at any time. Broken limbs happen. And, as we all know, rowdy college students, that can happen even more often. Crystal also linked to wow, words are hard, story in the Tufts Daily on this particular building. So I too had found that it seemed to be a frat building, but I guess in 2019, the frat was temporarily dissolved and Tufts bought the building from the National Frat Organization. So it's Tufts owned and not owned by the frat. So it might not be intended to be a frat house. Thank you so much for finding this. I did not see this in my Googling. So that, I think, makes a difference in terms of the arguments we want to make, because I too agreed with Leon on, if this is a frat and they're making these significant changes, there's absolutely no reason to not make it fully accessible. So Leon and Crystal.
Yeah, that affects the argument we make of okay, if they can show these 3 things, then maybe, I guess, could possibly apply. So we should figure out how we want to word that. And do we think that, if it's only ever going to be first year housing and they can show those other things, that we would consider saying it was okay? Or do we think that no, not even then? So that would be a thing to sort out, given that apparently is a possibility that I didn't think it was.
Great. Crystal?
Hi, this is Crystal. Sorry for sending messages in the chat. I was thinking that it would be easier and not interrupt people, but I didn't realize it wasn't available to everyone. So as someone who was a tough student, the other thing of note on the campus is that this is primo real estate for students who select their dorm rooms after the first year, or sometimes even after their first semester, because it's on Professor's Row, which is really close to a lot of the academic quad and also the social life. This is I mean, there's a reason why it was a frat house, because it's a really good location. This is a very desirable location for students to be, and it should just be accessible. Sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And no worries. We are all learning constantly and none of us are perfect. So thank you for taking the note. Jamie, did you have anything before?
I don't have anything to add on the specific variance request. I do want to disagree with you a bit on your general comment about variances shouldn't exist, because not all organizations that are seeking to build something or do something are toughs. Like there are small projects and realistic constraints, and that is why this process exists. And I think it's good that it exists. I just don't think toughs should be trying to get out of doing what the ADA says they're supposed to do. That's not what variances are supposed to be for.
This is Bonnie. Thank you. I appreciate the call in. Yeah, I get frustrated by, people like Tufts doing this and other organizations spending millions of dollars, and even small organizations when they just don't want to do it, when it's a small thing and they don't want to seek out any help to be able to do it. I think outdoor dining is a prime example of that. The city is offering $10,000 to each restaurant to make things accessible, and they don't want to engage with it. And so, yeah, I get frustrated and there's a little bit of hyperbole there, but you're absolutely right. So thank you. Leanne, you put your hand back up.
Yeah, I have a question for Crystal, because apparently they have more familiarity with the tough storms. And the point about this being a central location makes me wonder where the existing accessible dorms are. And so the one I'm seeing listed online with an elevator is Harleston. Do you happen to know, is that also centrally located, or is it out of the way? And are there others that you know about that are accessible and centrally located?
This is Crystal. If you spell it for me, if it's okay to spell it for me in the chat, that would be fine. Then I can get you an answer in a moment.
Okay. Let me also click on it and see if it has an address. It does not appear to give me an address, so let me send you. I'm just gonna put the link to that one because that was the easiest thing for me to copy.
This is Bonnie. It looks to be 30 Lower Campus Road, if that means anything.
And I'm just going to send that to everyone because I can't send it to Crystal directly.
Ah, South Hall. Right. Hold on.
And then I'm sending another one. Sophia Gordon Hall is the one listed for juniors and seniors. And then there are some that it doesn't say.
Crystal?
Okay. So Harleston Hall used to be South Hall, is not a horrible location, but is not is not ideal. Professor's Row is just like where it is at. Gordon Hall is so if you look at Tufts, Professor's Row and the Green are the like, or the Quad are the highly desirable places to be. The further you get from Professor's Row, or the further you get from the Quad on Professor's Row, like the further toward College Ave, the less desirable. So of these three locations, the ex-frat house is the most desirable. And I mean, in my admittedly personal opinion, it also depends on whether the student is like, you know, an arts major or whatnot and wants to be closer to Edithman, in which case Sophia Gordon Hall would be awesome. But regardless, in terms of general student life and in terms of closeness to the health center, the bookstore, and the Quad, and the Tufts shuttle stops, the 114 Professor's Row ex-frat house is the most desirable of those options.
That is useful information. Thank you.
This is Bonnie. Thank you. Yeah, so I spoke with Michael Mui from the Boston Center for Independent Living a little bit about this, and he brought up many of the things the rest of you have brought up. You know, we talk about the substantial impact, right? I'm trying to look at what it says. Would result in excessive or unreasonable costs without substantial benefits for people with disability. So in terms of the substantial benefits, the questions are, like Leanne said, are there options? And it sounds like maybe there aren't. Tufts didn't talk about that at all in their application, but I think it would be perfectly reasonable for us to say, we believe that there would be substantial benefits, and they don't prove that there aren't. Please come back with more of that. Some things we didn't touch upon are the terrain, like how does this compare versus the rest of campus? And Crystal, that's a good point to talk about the shuttle access, because I think especially for students with disabilities, that might be really critical. And if they have to go further to get to it, that's a problem. I unfortunately can't find my notes from my conversation with Michael because I'm using two computers, and I had them well prepared for last week and got a little discombobulated. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement here that they haven't shown that it's not possible to do, that it wouldn't provide a substantial benefit, that it would be too high a cost. One thing I noted in the application, they said that the value of the project was, I think it was 2.1 million. But if you look further into the documentation, they say that what they're spending is over 3 million. And so obviously one of those numbers is incorrect, because I don't think they would be spending $1 million more than they think the project is worth. But if they are, then that's even more egregious that they're saying we can't spend this money. The ramp in particular, it was listed at around $168,000 to make it compliant. I mean, there's absolutely no reason on a project scope this size that would be considered excessive. So I think in terms of the outdoor elevator, I know they talked about elevators some. They said it was kind of a small property, but I'm not certain that they've shown that that isn't a possibility. They talked about not wanting to lower the rear entrance because it would they didn't feel it would be worthwhile, but they didn't say that they couldn't put one in there. So I think we're probably all in agreement that we don't think this variance should be requested or granted as is. And I want to get into the nuance of how we're going to write it up, but I see Harriet and Crystal. So let's take those comments and then try and get into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, from what I recollect, the elevator would be 840,000 or some such nonsense like that. And their complaint was it would require some structural changes. And accessibility often requires structural changes. And that's kind of a part of the package. And it's not, I think they stated it is not a historic building. Correct me if someone has read in more detail. That's all.
That is also what I remember. This is Leanne.
Mhm. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Crystal?
The one caveat I would have on the assessment of the worth of the building is to remember that Tufts' relationship with the city is occasionally very strange and perhaps could be described as fraught. And so they may not have had the building assessed anytime recently, and that number might be coming from the assessment of the city on the current value of the building. And that might be the weirdness with, oh my goodness, they're spending so much on construction on like more than the building is worth according to them. I don't know that that's the case, but don't hinge like, it is an important point to make, I believe, but I would suggest not hinging a lot of the written argument on it.
This is Bonnie. Thank you. So I'm looking at it now, and it's saying that the value of the work under question 10 is 1.2 million. The assessor's value, oh, I just had it. It was like right underneath. Let me search.
2.174 million.
Okay, and then further on page 11, it says the cost of the work is estimated at 2.3 million. Which, oh, they're saying that the cost to do this work.
Well, what's the one?
No, there's no, that's without the, this application is so dense. Let me finish this and then I see your hand, Jamie. So it talks about the renovation includes cosmetic upgrades and a gut renovation and exterior work, landscape upgrades, and the repair of the fire escape. The cost of the work is estimated at 2.3 million. And that triggers full accessibility. So I believe that's what they're spending even without doing this accessibility work. And that I think makes it a little harder to, so to make the common areas accessible, they're estimating $430,000. And for the ramp and the rear entry with a ramp or a lift and the other front door stuff, 837. The elevator they're estimating at 472,000. So that's, but I think they would need to make other modifications to make the elevator worth it. Jamie?
I think Henry had a hand up before I did.
Oh, sorry, I did not even see that. Henry and then Jamie?
Thank you. I don't know how to make the little yellow hand in the corner there. So I was just physically raising
That's
my
okay.
hand.
I had something on the screen where I didn't see it. My apologies. I'm trying to look at the application as well. So my fault.
But thank you, Jamie. I'm gonna pass it back to you and recollect my thoughts here. Go ahead, Jamie.
Just for reference, the raise hand button is in the menu at the bottom of the Zoom application. If you click reactions, it gives you raise hand is like its own row, and then there are a few other things in their own row. And then all the other ones just go away after a moment, and raise hand, you have to go back and click lower hand when you're done having your hand raised. I just wanted to point out that the first of those numbers that you were referring to, Bonnie, in question 10, that is relating to a past permit from March of 2021. So that 1.2 million is a different project, and perhaps we could find out what that was from the permit number, but it's not the same number. So that's all I wanted to point out.
This is Bonnie, thank you. Henry?
Okay, thanks. Just looking at the map, it looks to me like this location is in Medford. Why is this on our plate?
This is Leon. I think that
Front doors in Somerville.
if you, yeah, like looking at Google, like on Google Maps, when I put in the address, it said Medford. When I actually like said, show me the boundaries of Somerville, it was in a different spot. So I think it is technically in Somerville, and just the address is weird or something.
The front door rule.
I had that same question.
Okay, this was Henry, and that was my question. Thank you.
I don't know if it matters, but they have been not paying taxes for their property to the city for a very long time. I know that's coming up as to why. I know that has nothing to do with a variance request, but if we look at how this is not feasible because of cost, I certainly can say that we know they are not paying the city taxes.
This is,
Harriet, may I follow on that just for a split
Yes.
second? Okay. Harriet speaking. And in fact, because I've been on the steering committee for Our Revolution Somerville, it's very clear Tufts pays 25% of their tax bill to Boston, okay, where they have locations in Boston. But we just thought we so desperately needed a nonprofit or whatever they think they are in this city 15 or more years ago that we haven't been able to corner them in the right way or persuade them to pay any taxes, sufficiently speaking. So that's all. Thank you.
this is Bonnie. I think, the taxes, while unfortunate, are not the thing that we can use to go against this. However, I tried to find it and I haven't been able to. I've been in Somerville quite some time. I know that within the past 10 years, there was a big thing where Tufts built some new housing and they did not want to make it accessible throughout. They specifically wanted to congregate the accessible rooms in just one building on just one floor. And I don't know what the outcome of that was, but this isn't the first time that they've done this. And I'm looking at an article now from 2018, which is not that far, that far past. And they're talking about different halls and that still have stairs and inaccessible spaces. So there's a lot at Tufts that already hasn't been updated. And I think the main thing is they have spent $2 million purchasing a building. They are putting in an additional $2 million of renovations, and they're bulking at doing the same to make it accessible. And I think, to Henry's point of Tufts has deep pockets, I think it's not infeasible for them to do. So we should be focusing on, is it technologically feasible? Have they shown that there would not be substantial benefit? I think the answer to the first one is it is technologically feasible, if difficult, and it would have substantial benefit. So there's a lot here. I am not as well versed in the nuance of the technical details, and I know that when BCIL does their commentary, they get heavily into that. I could try to do that. I'm not certain of how good a job I would do, but I think doing a narrative version of this is why we think it's important and this is what we'd want to see for them to prove these things might be a better way for us to go with our comments, if people agree with that. Leanne?
Yeah, this is Leanne. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we shouldn't be trying to like do the technical analysis ourselves. We should just be saying they have not demonstrated that it's technologically infeasible. And these are all the reasons that it would provide substantial benefit. And like, these are the things that they would need to show to make it reasonable to grant this variance and have a like fairly stringent, like they would have to show that, you know, nobody is ever going to specifically ask to live here, that there is equivalent housing in terms of.
Bean, can you just let me get these points down? So
Yes.
would need to show that nobody will specifically request to live here.
That there is equivalent housing in terms of both facilities and location, and that there are multiple options for students to choose in housing if they require accessibility.
Excuse me, do you mean there should be or there already are? Leanne, Harriet speaking.
That a requirement of granting the variance would be that there are already other options. There are already a variety of other options in similar locations, which I'm pretty sure the answer is that there aren't. But I would need them to demonstrate that to consider granting it. And I think part of the demonstrating the technological infeasibility would be, actually, no, I think we can just leave out the part about that I was saying about, you know, in addition to monetary expense, they would have to show that it would have an effect on the number of students that could be housed comfortably. I think that, no, even if it does, they should still do it. So yeah, I think just focusing on the lack of equivalent options and you didn't show technological infeasibility.
Okay, Henry?
Sorry, I'm having trouble finding the unmute button. This is Henry Hardy. I appreciate Leanne's comments, and I think they're very thoughtful. I have some concerns. Going back to my comment that separate is not equal. I mean, just to take the counterfactual, let's suppose that every other dorm and every other Tufts building was compliant, excepting for this one. And now they're saying, well, we don't want to make this one compliant. Would that be okay? I don't think it would. I don't think that having some dorms which are segregated and some dorms which are unsegregated is okay. Because when we're talking about a building not being accessible, we're talking about a building not being accessible to a protected class of persons, just like if we were talking about a building not being accessible to gay people, or if we were talking about a building not being accessible to Black people or to any other protected group. So I don't think that we should suggest to them that well, if you did this, that, and the other thing, then this would be okay. That's really muddying our message. And that's not the question that's on our plate. What they've presented us isn't okay, full stop. And it wouldn't be okay even if everything else on the Tufts campus was compliant. Even if Tufts was a poor, historically Black college or university that was struggling to make ends meet, it would not be okay because it doesn't meet the statutory and regulatory requirement. It just doesn't. It's not close. It's not in the ballpark. And so I think that we should focus on your concerns, Leanne, but I don't think that we should posit to them, well, if you promise us these things, which we can't enforce or even know, then it would be okay, because we don't have a way to enforce who they put in there in the future or what purpose they put that property to. We don't even have a way to know that. But it concerns me if this has historically been a property associated with a private organization, an elite racist private organization, then they flip the property, they're renovating it, then they're gonna flip it back to the club owners. I mean, this is really something I'm very uncomfortable with, but even if none of these factors were in play, and even if Tufts didn't have dirty hands in some respects as far as these issues historically, I think we could just, I think it's most useful for us to narrowly focus on they had to reach this far, and they had to reach this far, and they had to reach this far, and they didn't reach any of them, period. I mean, that is my suggestion, but I take it in good heart, your concerns, Leanne, and they're not misplaced. I just think that we should try to focus on what we can say to the people making the decision that will affect their decision, and that's going to be based on the statute and the regulation. And we can just say, look, they had to prove their case and they didn't do it.
This is
Thank you.
fine. Thank you, Henry. Okay, so I just want to do a quick time check. It's 6 p.m. and we do have other things on the agenda that I definitely want to get to. So I want to try to wrap this up, but I see Harriet and then Leanne, and then let's try to just agree on what we're going to do with this. But I appreciate those comments, Henry, and I kind of agree. So Harriet?
Yeah, I'm just adding to the, what's our best fuel to have them pay attention? And we've been speaking about it, and I'm sure you've got it in the comments. Location. Not only must the building be accessible, but this is a very powerful location, which adds to the accessibility. And if they decline, if they get their variant, they're not really making it fully accessible. Therefore, and I don't know if that's a strong enough argument, location, but at least it's something. And maybe we, others other than myself can rank that piece. But I do think centralized location is very important for folks with disabilities. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Leanne?
Yeah, just to respond to that, I think location absolutely is, and especially on a campus like Tufts, which does have a lot of hills. And also to Henry, thank you. I agree, and that has helped me reframe things. I think I was trying to figure out an argument that I thought would work, but no, we shouldn't even suggest that. I think, yeah, you're correct. We should just say that, their argument is that there are other accessible, housing options, and we don't think that is a sufficient argument because there is not the same options. And then, as far as location and choice, and those are important. And so, yes, I agree wholeheartedly, and thank you for saying that.
Crystal, if it's brief.
Yes, sorry. A really succinct argument to make might be that anyone in a manual wheelchair who is at Tufts would like be far better off being on Professor's Row, which is a flat row to the campus bookstore, and which has less of the hills required to get to any classroom, because it is
Thank you.
substantially closer to almost all of the classrooms on campus.
Thank you. Holly?
I would like to suggest that we move to a vote or some type of agreement so we can move on to the next
Yes.
thing on the item. I think everyone has incredible comments and positions, and I value all of them, but in the sense that it is 6:05 and there are 3 members who have to be here to vote.
Yes.
I want to make sure that I'm present because I have
Yes,
a very short off.
thank you.
Forgive me.
Leon, is this, are you gonna motion or? Leon, you're
I
muted.
just,
Leon, you're
I
muted.
just wanted to add
Sorry,
that,
thank you.
Yep, sorry,
excuse me
Holly.
one second, Holly. I just wanted to add that what everyone said here tonight should be submitted to the board that'll be making this decision, because it's very important, and you have a direct voice that way, and you can also attend. But I just want the voting to happen now, so please understand.
Yes, definitely, and I agree on time. The one thing I don't want to get missed is I think it is important to also touch on the other parts of the variance. And even if they manage to get the not having an elevator granted, there are other parts that should still not be granted. The
This
most important and sorry,
is
go ahead.
Bonnie. I think was there anything that people wanted to say, yes, this sounds fine? Because I think there wasn't, and we shouldn't take them item by item. I think we should just say that we do not think any of these should be granted because they have not met these things to show that they shouldn't do it. So I don't think we need to do them one by one. I think we should just say none of this meets these bars.
Okay. Can I mention the one that
Sure.
I thought
Yeah,
could be touched on? I think specifically the not having accessible restrooms on the upper stories. Because they're saying we don't need this because there's no way to get there. And I think that is one that is important to specifically call out as no, even if there's not an elevator to the upper stories, there should still be an accessible restroom. Because, people get hurt and don't want to have to leave their housing and will find ways to get in and out. But if they can't use the restroom once they're there, that doesn't work. And also, people will have guests and help their guests in, but the guests still need a restroom. So that is one that I specifically think has the potential to, if the elevator isn't granted, get wrapped into, okay, it's fine because there's not an accessible route there. And I think it is an important one to have anyway.
This is Bonnie. I see your point, but I'm not sure that trying to break down specifics is going to be beneficial to us, because every single one could be a, if not this, then that, right? Like, if you don't do the ramp, then you don't need to do the other things on the first floor because people can't get in. And so you haven't done those, so you don't need the restrooms. And I think it leaves open room for nuance that we don't need to leave, but I'm happy to discuss that separately. We've got 22 minutes, so Jamie?
So I was going to suggest / ask, would the procedurally appropriate thing to do here be for one of the full commissioners to make to motion to recommend against approving the variance to the Who is it? The
Mass Architectural
Anyway.
Access Board.
yes.
MAAB.
Um,
Yeah.
And then we have, like, what's going to happen in practice is that Bonnie is going to write up our reasoning on that and submit it to them. But do we need to like formally establish that, or would that just be as part of passing that motion? Then Bonnie can just do that.
Here, why don't I make a motion? I motion to deputize Bonnie to write a memo, is that the right word? To the MAIB, expressing the commission's opinion that this variance should not be approved, and laying out the arguments that we have discussed in this meeting.
I, Holly Simeone, second that motion.
Okay. Before I call to approve it, Adrian popped up on camera, so I want to make sure you didn't have a comment on this.
No, I'm here. I've been listening. I do think it's a travesty in 2022 that a well-known and well-respected university such as Tufts is dragging their feet, but especially because they have an office for accessibility where it says you as a student can make accommodation requests and accessibility requests so you can be successful there. So I find that interesting. But
Yep.
I think your comment is very well said about, such an institution that we hold in regard here.
yeah, I mean, people
not
come from all over the
problematic.
world to go to Tufts. It's one of those places.
I would recommend that we add that at the end of our statement, if anyone else disagrees.
Yeah,
Or agrees,
like
let me know. I think it's very powerful, Adrian.
you lose relevance if you don't want to be open and inclusive to everybody.
I'm writing this down. Okay, great. So all in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye, Holly.
Great. Motion passes unanimously. I will get that written and sent prior to Monday morning, as I have promised the Architectural Access Board. Going back. So other, Harriet, I'm going to apologize. I'm not certain.
Oh, no, it's not essential. It's not essential. Next time.
I
I
promise
can-
it will
Yeah.
go
No.
on next. So I'm gonna skip a little bit out of order. I'm not gonna do the elected officers because I think we don't have time for that discussion. So accessible parking funds update. The city councilor JT Scott and Councilor Klingon put forward a resolution at city council a couple of weeks ago, authorizing the commission to disperse at their discretion and according to the procedures they deem fit, any funds allocated to the account. What that means is we don't need to come up with a list of every single thing, and we don't need to go before council to get permission. They trust that we are going to use the funds responsibly and according to the law for how those funds can be used. And we simply need to work with city staff on accessing the funds. On that note, the city finance director, Ed Bean, was also at that council meeting, and he is going to work with us on procurement and how to request funds. There is a meeting scheduled for next week.
Thursday. Yep.
Thursday, thank you, Adrian. Adrian and I will be meeting with Director Bean and some of his staff and possibly another commissioner, but need to sort that out. It was just scheduled, and we're going to go over the basics. He also was going to try and talk to some other municipalities about how they manage the funds. I spoke with a couple of folks. I spoke with an ADA coordinator and somebody else who is a chair of a commission, and they submit requests and it goes through the procurement process, and then the money is spent that's all handled for them. And I imagine it'll go similarly in Somerville. So that's in process. And I hope to come back to you for next month's meeting with this is how we ask for the thing. So let's have some ideas ready to go on how we want to start spending money. I can say I did a quick Google search, and several other commissions have very formalized scholarship programs where they have people apply each year. I know that's one of the things we talked about. It might be a little late to do that for this particular year, but I think it's a really great one to look at. Like, other people have detailed, they've laid out, this is what we do, here's our process, here's what we're looking for. They have applications, and I think there's a lot out there for us to have mentors and have people we could talk to model something off of. So that one might be really good to get in place for next year without us needing to do a lot of the work to create something from scratch. Some of the other things might be a little trickier, like we've talked about, accessible recreation. I know that Somerville Alliance for Safe Streets has also been interested in figuring out how we can get accessible bikes here. The town of Acton just did that. And the difference I can see is that the towns that have done this have recreation facilities with staff that are there. And Somerville doesn't really have that. So it might be trickier for us to do. Still totally worth looking into, but might require a little bit more money, a little bit more effort. But yeah, hopefully we can start moving on this soon. So the big thing I want to talk about, the commissioner appointment process update. As you all know, the call was put out in April for commissioners, and myself and Adrian and Holly conducted interviews, and we made recommendations of associate commissioners Henry Hardy, Harriet Ranvig, and Pauline Downing, in addition to recommending another constituent, Deborah Haber, who had applied. And after a month of sitting on those recommendations, last week, the administration informed me that because of a lack of applicants and a lack of diversity in the applicants, they will not be moving anybody forward. They've said that they would like to put out the call again, and nobody will be barred from being considered once they put out that call again. But my personal feelings, I have a lot of them, but I think if they're seeking the diversity that I think they're seeking, there's little chance anybody would get moved forward because you're not a person of color. And I'm going to let Holly speak to that further.
Thanks, Bonnie. When I saw the explanation that was sent to us, myself, Bonnie, and Adrian, I was concerned because we followed very strict rules. Adrian ensured that our process was appropriate. We used the exact same set of questions that we asked all of the candidates. We considered our decisions based on what a person had to offer that was unique. That was something maybe wasn't already represented, either their experience, their lives, their family members, possibly even how they identified as being disabled. We cannot and would not ask someone to describe that, but many of the applicants did discuss that. And we did not vote for all candidates, but those that we did approve, I felt very strongly met the two goals, which was to be a resident of the city and to identify as someone who has a disability. But I have been asking for the documentation to understand the three pieces that were stated to why they wanted to find more candidates. And one I was looking for was the specific document. You know, we bring it forward what does the mayor's team look at next? What are their pieces? Because if we've met the two that are on the posting, please tell us what was lacking. I spoke with Hannah for a while, and
This is Bonnie. That would be Hannah Carrillo. She is the liaison to the mayor, or one of the liaisons to the mayor.
and I have asked her to reply at a time when myself and other members, voting members, can speak with our liaison about this more, understand what is documented. I believe that diversity, equity, inclusion is purposeful. It is something we should all be doing without having to call on it. I believe that representing all different people, including looking at a person's race, is important. But I do not believe that our commission or any commission should be required to have a count of or a representative of. We are to be diverse, we are to have equity, and we are to include everyone that meets those two pieces. So, and I don't want to say anything bad about Hannah. I'm not saying anything bad about anyone on this call. I'm not saying anything bad about the mayor. This isn't one fault of anyone, but it is concerning that we don't have the information to do our jobs so that we can get people on boards, on commission. And Adrian, you've been working on this a long time, trying to get it to happen. Bonnie, even longer. We have fantastic people right now. And I'm really sorry to deliver that news, but I will be drafting a note. She's taking back my requests and my questions, and I'd like to see, I personally would like them to review if, and explain why. I don't think we can force racial equality. I think we should seek racial equality. I think we should always try to ensure that if we do not have a candidate, or we have reached out and we cannot find interest in a candidate based on one piece of themselves, I don't feel that we should not look at the other candidates that themselves have other things that are diverse.
Thank you. I see the hands raised, and I want to go to Henry first, and I want to apologize as well to you and Harriet, but especially you, Henry. You've been going through this for quite some time, and I'm appalled, and I'm sorry that you've been subjected to this. So.
Oh, Bonnie, I have nothing but love for you and everybody on this commission, and Adrian. It's not personal, and I have to keep reminding myself not to take it as a personal affront, but there's an institutional problem here. We have statutory requirements to have some people who are representative of a protected class of persons on the commission to protect their interests. And that class of protected persons is persons with disabilities. And that's the legal standard that we have to meet. If I felt that Black folks were coming to this commission and being treated with disrespect or pushed away, or they wanted to apply and they weren't encouraged, or they weren't permitted to, that would be a problem. However, there's another issue here, which is the issue of democracy. There is a democratic process, and it's a process prescribed by law. And the law says, and the guidance says, that if there's a vacancy, it's to be filled. It's not to be left open. What's happening is not congruent with the intent of the law, and it's not congruent with the guidance about how this commission is supposed to be constituted. And the reason that those vacancies are supposed to be filled is so that a committee doesn't get starved into submission by not having its appointments filled, or it doesn't get starved into inactivity or non-existence. Because this is something that has a statutory existence, and we have certain statutory rights. We need to talk to the ACLU or the National Lawyers Guild. We need to have some pushback on this, not because it impacts me personally, because it doesn't. I can do everything I want to do here. I can say my part as an associate commissioner, and I'm not subject to being removed by the mayor as an associate commissioner. However, if this commission doesn't have its roles filled, it will not be able to carry out its statutory function. And that's what's at risk here. And that is unacceptable. And it puts at risk not just me and not just this commission, but all the disabled people in Somerville that we are responsible to. So I think we need to take some legal counsel and see where we can go with this. It's not acceptable to me, and I'm disappointed but not surprised. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Quickly, because we've only got a few minutes, I will say that I have reached out to an employment lawyer. I know the commission's unpaid, but I do believe this would fall under employment law because we are technically employees. And I mean, it states right on our call for members that we do not discriminate based on those protected classes. And I'll point out that race is not something that we asked about in the submission. So it's something that we can make guesses about, but it wasn't explicitly asked for. So that's a thing as well. But I do want to just note that you can do everything in as associate commissioner currently because of how I preside as chair. That's not a given. And I would like that to be a given, but Leanne and I won't be on this commission forever. And as it currently stands, the only 3 members are a person who does not identify as having a disability, a city staffer, and 1 person with a disability. So the commission would not meet any of those things, and it would be entirely at the whim of the next chair how they would like to run their meetings. So Jamie and then Leanne, we've got about 3 minutes.
I just wanted to ask, have they said specifically that the lack of diversity was to do with race?
It has not specifically been said to me,
Okay.
but I do believe that that is, I'm not sure what's been said to Adrienne. If you've had further conversations outside of email that I've seen.
Just looking at the response that Hannah had sent to both of you, I think at around 2:30 this afternoon.
Mhm.
Let's see. Let's see. So the words that Hannah used were that the process is centered around inclusion, equity, and access. And that really the desire of this subsequent call, it is not a rejection of the current slate. I want to be clear about that. But it is, the hope of it is to cast a wider net in hopes of increasing diversity. So that's the language that is being used.
Yeah, I will note that it says that they want to attract applicants who represent all corners of Somerville life. And as we've all pointed out before, we feel that the current commissioners and associate commissioners who we have recommended to be full commissioners do represent many aspects of Somerville life. We have diversity across socioeconomic status and education and orientation and gender, and there's a lot of differences in terms of the Somerville lives that we all lead. So it has not been stated explicitly in writing. I do firmly believe that it is about racial diversity. But regardless, as Hallie pointed out, we have not been presented anything that lists out what they are actually seeking, or what would make somebody qualified, or what would feel like enough applicants. There is nothing specific, and they have specifically said that as part of the transition process, they're reevaluating policies, including these, and that reevaluation remains ongoing, which to me is a constantly moving target without any written documentation, because if we don't know where the bar is, I'm not sure how we hit it. And given that something has changed every time we've tried to move through this process, it feels a little disingenuous to me. Leanne, and then we need to wrap up.
Yeah, I'm going to try to stay civil because I find this entire thing appalling. I have so many thoughts on this. The first is, I know it's not me, but apologies to all of the candidates who are waiting, because it is absolutely ludicrous and unfair to you to put you through this. I think one of the first thing I'm wondering is this happening to other commissions as well? Because it very much feels like it's an excuse to try to disempower the commission, and without evidence that this is actually being applied across the board, it's hard to not think that. As far as diversity and what that means, like, as Bonnie said, there is an incredible amount of diversity on this commission. It is true that we do not have very much racial diversity, and I'm not thrilled about that. But for the administration to keep saying diversity, diversity, and be completely ignoring the diversity that we do bring, it feels like a slap in the face and an erasure of our identities, because it's just saying, well, it's not racial diversity, so it doesn't count, except without specifically stating that. The other question I have is, how is diversity being determined? Like, I know we specifically ask about disability identity because that is part of the requirements of the commission, but I know when I applied, I wasn't asked about race or any of other identities, and Bonnie said that wasn't part of this application process. So how is diversity being determined? Is this just clearly somebody is making assumptions? Like, who is making this? Like, how are we saying that our current cast isn't diverse enough if we don't even have any way to know what their identities are? And the last thing that I find probably the most problematic, going on the assumption that we are talking about racial diversity here, as seems fairly clear, I think that racial diversity is great, and I would love to have it. I also think it is incredibly problematic to require it on a volunteer commission, because marginalized people are already asked to do unpaid labor all the time, and that is not a good thing. It's just something that they need to do if they are going to have their rights met, or if they want other people to know anything about what to do, because nobody else wants to do the work. And so it's well, if you want it to happen, you have to do it. Multiply marginalized people are hit even harder by this, while at the same time having on average fewer resources. So if you are asking disabled people of color or disabled people who are multiply marginalized in some other way, if it's not about race, then that's already a problem of you're asking multiply marginalized people to do unpaid labor. But in this case, it's going beyond the threat of, well, if you don't do it, nobody else will, to if you don't do it, we actively won't let anybody else, which that is just not okay. And like, if there are people of color who want to join the commission, that's amazing. I would love their input, but also they should not be required to put their time and energy into this. And if the administration wants more racial diversity on the commission, they should start by actually supporting the commission and valuing the contributions of the people who are here and making it possible for us to get things done so that it feels like a worthwhile place for someone with limited resources to spend their energy. Because by saying, oh, we're not even going to put forth these people who have been putting in a lot of time and energy for months, that's not making it seem like a place that's worth to spend your energy if you don't have a lot of it. And so it's completely not, while being incredibly problematic in, the implementation or in the, just the idea of we must have people of color who already don't have as much time and energy doing this unpaid work, you're also making it less likely that they're going to want to apply.
This is Bonnie. Thank you, Leanne. I would echo everything you said. I have not seen anything from the administration with clear guidelines, and I have not seen anything related to breaking down the structural barriers that exist to serving. And the budget just happened. That was something that was requested by members of this commission, in addition to city councilors, to provide support to the commissions, and nothing was put in the budget for it, which the mayor had control over. So that's a problem. Unfortunately, I do want to respect the captioner's time. Again, I'm sorry, and I wish there was something better for you. Holly and I will be continuing to ask questions. I am happy to talk with you, Henry, about speaking with a lawyer and pass on anything I find. I would hope, as our liaison, Adrian, that you are also talking to the administration about getting details, because there really haven't been any. There's nothing clear, and we were presented this process as all boards and commissions need to have the same process. What you went through putting out the call last year and trying to put people forth doesn't count. You need to do it over. And now what we're being told is the process is ongoing and constantly changing. And that's not consistent, and it's not fair. And in terms of other boards and commissions, I have not been able to do the research fully because some of it will require public records requests. But I do know that a candidate for the Zoning Board of Appeals was put forth last night. They are somebody who is currently serving in an alternate position, and they were put forth to be promoted to full commissioner. And when I pointed that out to Hannah and expressed my concern because the ZBA had 2 open memberships, what I was told is the call did recently go out, and there's not time to get an appointment process completed before the summer recess. So they are looking to bump this person up to be a full board member. And I don't see how that's different than bumping our associates up to be full members. And I don't see why there not being time should make that board act differently than our commission if the process is supposed to be fair and equitable and the same across the board. And if we're talking equitable, we know that that does not always mean equal. It means you take into consideration the other factors. And that would be that this commission struggled to meet quorum for years, has worked incredibly hard to get people invested, has had people showing up, did put people forth in the previous administration, and nothing has happened because there has been a continued disinvestment in the commission. So I would say equitable would be to move forward these appointments, especially knowing that there are going to be 2 more open seats as soon as we have new people confirmed. And that would give them a better commission position to get more people in and still leave room for whatever diversity they feel is lacking. So that's my thoughts. Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna motion to adjourn the meeting. That's the word. Thanks.
I will second.
Great. Good to see everybody. Bye.